Hello everyone, and welcome to my next YouTube video. Tonight is all about gaslighting, a term I mentioned briefly in an earlier video. The reason I want to focus on gaslighting is because it can be so difficult to pinpoint within a relationship due to the many different forms that it can take. So, the term gaslighting comes from the 1944 film called Gaslight, which can be rented from your local library. In the movie, the husband systematically manipulates his wife's environment and then tells her that she's crazy when she points out the inconsistencies. The title comes from the way he is secretly turning on the gas lamps in their purportedly blocked-off attic, which in turn makes the rest of the house lamps flicker as the gas fueling them has just been tapped. When she asks about the flickering, he says, "What are you talking about? Your imagination must be going wild." It's a classic movie, and I really recommend it to everyone. So, gaslighting is when a batterer either A, feeds a victim false information, B, withholds true information from the victim, or C, both. The intention behind gaslighting is to cause the victim to doubt their own perceptions, their judgments, and even reality itself. This causes the victim's self-esteem and self-confidence to plummet, which in turn makes the victim easier to control. I particularly liked Shannon Firth's description. She says that in order to be effective, gaslighting depends first on convincing the victim that their thinking is distorted, and secondly, persuading the victim that the victimizer's ideas are the correct and true ones. Gaslighting occurs in stages. The stages do not necessarily occur in a certain order, nor do they last the same length of time for everybody. The first stage is disbelief. You react incredulously to an odd behavior that your partner displays, and it disorients you so much that you may believe the gaslighter when they tell you that they're sorry and that they won't do it again. A gaslighter may present these lies so convincingly that you begin to question your own memories and decisions. So you dismiss their behavior as minor and simply hope that the behavior was a one-time thing. But when it does happen again, you may believe that if you could just act differently or do something different, then the behavior will stop. The second stage is defense. When you finally do confront the gaslighter with your concerns about their behavior, they will try to redirect the focus of the conversation onto your own behavior, insisting that you are the real culprit. You in turn act defensively against the manipulation. You feel like you have to defend yourself to show that you aren't just too sensitive, you aren't just too crazy, that there is a legitimate problem in the relationship. Comments such as, "You're too sensitive," may seem mild and harmless at first, but it actually represents a moment where the speaker is making a judgment about how you should feel. They are telling you that you are not allowed to feel the way that you do, that you should be feeling something else instead. They are trying to define your reality. They are denying your feelings and insisting on theirs. You may become angry that your partner does not view their behavior in the same way that you do, and you work extra hard to convince them of your point. This only plays into their hands and leads to stage 3, which is depression. At this point, your relationship doesn't bring you as much joy as it used to. You may have lost your voice in the relationship. You're only able to see the relationship through the partner's point of view because you have allowed them to ever so gradually define your reality for so long. Gaslighting is the result of fear. Fear of what will happen to you if you continue to question the gaslighter's behavior. It perpetrates an environment of fear or instability or unpredictability within the relationship. After a while, this kind of an environment will eventually erode your self-confidence and self-esteem, and it blurs the line between fantasy and reality. Perhaps you stop questioning the gaslighter because you don't want to start yet another fight, or because you're afraid that he'll hit you if you bring up the subject again. In my own relationship, time spent with friends and family would allow me to start to see my relationship for what it really was, but as soon as I went home to my gaslighter, I was sucked back into their reality. This is one of the reasons why gaslighters work so hard to isolate their victims from people who are not so easily manipulated. And eventually it felt like there was this sense of duality in how I viewed my relationship when I was with my gaslighter, as opposed to when I was with people who actually loved me and cared for my best interests. This is why the depression stage can be so difficult to escape from. The abuser makes themselves indispensable to the victim because the gaslightee has become so dependent on the gaslighter to interpret the world around them. Victims of gaslighting are portrayed as too sensitive, as nagging bitches, or in the more extreme cases, they are legitimately dubbed as crazy by both the gaslighter and anybody who can be persuaded to believe the information that the gaslighter is misrepresenting to them. In some cases, the abuser will cause the victim to feel so unstable that the victim thinks they are paranoid. The abuser will then use this to turn himself into the victim of his crazy girlfriend. So now the victim is crazy, unstable, or deranged, while the abuser is universally regarded as the sufferer. My gaslighter would constantly tell me how bad my memory was, and I knew that I didn't always remember the particulars, but it grew to the point where even when I remembered something perfectly, he would still tell me that I was confused and that what had happened didn't actually happen. And there are some techniques that gaslighters can use to control you. I mentioned that gaslighters withhold information. That can mean that an abuser declines to share their emotions, essentially stonewalling the victim, or perhaps the gaslighter refuses to admit to certain actions that they may have done, such as turning on the gas lamps. The gaslighter may even feign forgetfulness of promises they made or of past conversations they've had, things of this nature, saying that they didn't really happen. Another form of this is called blocking, where the gaslighter refuses to listen to your concerns or to comment on them or to answer to them in any way. They may have stated, "I'm not going through this again tonight." They may even play dumb and appear to misunderstand something that they are capable of understanding. Diverting, on the other hand, is where the gaslighter will change the subject by accusing the victim of wrongfully suggesting that the abuser has done something wrong. He is diverting her attention away from the issue at hand by getting her to concentrate on whatever irrelevant statement he may make. Perhaps he's telling you, "Your false accusations have caused the emotional distance between us," which then causes the victim to get defensive. This is another form of blame shifting, which I also mentioned in an earlier video. Gaslighting effectively dodges a resolute answer to the victim's concerns, and it shows an unhealthy lack of concern for the victim's feelings on the part of the gaslighter. Gaslighters also present false information to the victim. For example, a husband might forge his wife's signature on a prenup and then try to convince her that she actually signed it by telling her, "Don't you remember signing this? You must be getting forgetful." I need to mention that gaslighting usually happens gradually. I recently read an analogy about a frog. It goes that if you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump out. But if you put the frog in warm water and gradually turn up the heat, the frog will stay there until it dies. This applies to gaslighting as well as to many other forms of abuse. The gaslighter doesn't just suddenly start calling you crazy. They do it over time with increasing frequency until the victim considers the behavior to be normal and actually starts to believe what the gaslighter is telling them. What makes gaslighting so difficult to identify is the fact that it can be done in so many different ways. It can be vocal, where the gaslighter is using words to imply something about the victim. It can be indirect, where the gaslighter might use sarcasm and irony to undermine the victim. It can be physical, where the gaslighter moves something around and then denies it completely. It can be nonverbal. For example, a gaslighter may communicate a lack of respect through their body language. They might grimace or roll their eyes or give the victim a cold shoulder in order to indicate that the victim's choice is not the correct choice. And then there are the more sophisticated forms of gaslighting. There is gaslighting by proxy, also called triangulation gaslighting. Here, the abuser may recruit third parties to do their bidding, to perhaps spy on the victim, to try to persuade the victim to do something, or even to tempt the victim. The gaslighter uses these people like pawns on a chessboard, and when the job is done, he dumps them. No explanation necessary. Another form of control by proxy, the abuser may set up elaborate, orchestrated schemes to deceive the victim or even to provoke the victim into doing something that will get the victim into trouble. The abuser can then use the court system to threaten or stalk or coerce the family. If you are being gaslighted, you may feel that you constantly second-guess yourself. You may feel the need to prove yourself. Your memory might have suddenly gone bad. You can't seem to remember the particulars of situations, especially those situations involving the gaslighter. You may have been called crazy or sensitive so many times that you actually start to believe it. Maybe you apologize too much, or you choose not to share certain bits of information with family or friends so that you don't have to explain or make excuses for your partner. You maybe feel like you're not good enough. You feel like you have become a different person, perhaps less confident or more stressed out since the relationship began. The problems in the relationship are always your problems. They're never a problem on the gaslighter's part. You often defer to the other person's take on a situation or a matter. You feel like you can't defend yourself verbally or emotionally anymore. And maybe you accept weird behavior as normal. There are many other symptoms of gaslighting, so if you want more information, I recommend the sources listed below. I've done a lot of research on this. There are quite a few sources for this video. So everybody have a good night.